The season ended earlier than we hoped, but there was a lot to like from the 2023-24 Bruins, and it's going to be a crazy offseason.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoke B. Today is Monday, May 20th, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. Free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The Bruins unfortunately lost in Game 6 to the Florida Panthers on Friday evening. And so we are entering off-season mode here on Locked On Boston Bruins, but we'll still be coming at you every single day for the time being. So much to talk about, including what went wrong, what went right this season, and what's next. And there's going to be a whole lot of what's next here in the off-season. Before we begin, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins. And you can find me, my hockey thoughts, dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren. All right, the Bruins losing 2-1 in Game 6 to the Florida Panthers. Gustav Forsling banging home a rebound on an Anton Lundell shot with about a minute and a half remaining in the third period. It seemed as though this was heading to overtime. Good chance that it could have gone to a Game 7, but alas, it was not meant to be. And Gustav Forsling batting home that rebound and catching Jeremy Swayman kind of off guard. And perhaps it was a save originally that Swayman should have held on to or not given up such a large rebound. But what we're not going to do is pin this on Jeremy Swayman, because there is absolutely no way the Bruins would be in that position were it not for how he had played all playoffs long. Swayman after the game said he was so overwhelmed with emotion, and full credit to the crowd for the Swayman chant after this one to show their appreciation for how good he had been. He said, "It's not about me as an individual, it's about the team, and to see it all end so abruptly is something you never want to feel." He added he was so proud of everyone and being here and setting the foundation for what is to come next. Pavel Zacha had given the Bruins a 1-0 lead late in the first period with his first ever in the Stanley Cup playoffs, but the Bruins just were not able to add to that lead, as had been the case so often in the playoffs. And when we talk about what went wrong, their lack of scoring is clear. They just did not have enough finishers, and they did not have as many, obviously, finishes as the Florida Panthers did in this series. Outscored 19-13 in all situations. Listen, at even strength, this series was fairly even. 11-10, the goal differential in favor of the Panthers, while there was a bigger gap in terms of shot attempts and shots on goal. High danger chances were actually 60-40 in favor of the Bruins in this series. So they were getting so many more high danger chances and just could not finish it off. High danger shooting percentage for the Panthers, 17.5%, whereas for the Bruins, it was only 8.33%. And that was their undoing in this one. They just could not finish, unfortunately, in this series. And that is something, as we'll discuss later on today, and over the course of the offseason, that's something the Bruins need to address. Now, again, in all situations, the Bruins had the advantage in terms of shooting percentage and in save percentage. So you would assume that they would win this series. Sorry, that was at 5-on-5. And if you look at, in all situations, the same thing. Better shooting percentage, better save percentage. Where this series really took a turn was with regards to special teams. The Bruins had one power play goal, and they allowed 6 on the part of the Florida Panthers. That's where the series really turned. The Bruins had just about half the amount of time on ice at 5-on-4 than did the Panthers. That was part of the problem for the Bruins. They did not stay out of the box. Too many men penalties, which is just a crazy issue to have had occur. I think it was 7 times over the course of the postseason. The Bruins, look, they had a chance in this series. And if Brad Marchand isn't knocked out of game 3, if Sam Bennett is held accountable for his actions in game 3 and not allowed to play game 4, and that goaltender interference situation where he scored after cross-checking Jeremy Swayman into the net, cross-checking Charlie Coyle into Jeremy Swayman, who was unable to keep the puck out of the net. If that didn't happen, if the Bruins bury some of these high danger chances that they had, a bunch of situations where they had breakaways they couldn't finish on, a bunch of opportunities where they had chances, but they could not get the puck on net or chose to pass instead of trying to get the puck on net, it could have been a different story. And that is part of the disappointment for me in this series. It wasn't as though, yes, the scores in game 2 and 3 were quite lopsided, and the shot differentials, shots, pretty lopsided as well, but there was still a path to victory here for the Boston Bruins. They were generating some high danger opportunities on Sergei Bobrovsky, and Jeremy Swayman played well enough to win this series. The Bruins had a better shooting percentage than the Florida Panthers, but they did not get enough shots on net, and bigger problem was that they could not finish the opportunities that they had. I mean, it was right there in game 6. Could have pushed it to overtime, which is a coin flip. It was basically next goal wins in the third period, and the Bruins could not get the job done. What's baffling to me and also disappointing is that dating back to last season in the playoffs, 6-game losing streak to the Florida Panthers on home ice. That's pretty damning, pretty unacceptable when you think about it. How can you lose 6 in a row to the same team on home ice? I mean, part of it is just Florida's better. They're the better team. They went to the Stanley Cup final last year. They won the division this year. This is a good team, and they're built to win and could very well knock off the New York Rangers and advance to the Stanley Cup final once again. But, of course, it is disappointing because it felt like a underdog Cinderella story for the Bruins, a team of destiny perhaps. They had some opportunities. They battled. They took the high road in many ways after the Sam Bennett incident. Marchand was able to come back and play in game 6, but ultimately they just did not have the horses to get it done. And we knew that. It's a transition season. They had a lot of holes to fill, and they did so on the cheap. But there's also a lot to build on moving forward, and we'll discuss that here as the podcast continues. Policy Genius helps you compare your options from top companies, and their team of licensed experts is on hand to help talk you through it. It's the country's leading online insurance marketplace, and it saves you time and money so you can provide your family with a financial safety net starting today. With Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options offer same-day approval and avoid unnecessary medical exams. They have no incentive to recommend one insurer over another, so you can trust their guidance. They give you unbiased advice from a licensed expert support team. Head to policygenius.com/lockedonnhl or click the link in the show notes to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/lockedonnhl. Thank you so much once again for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine, free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. And speaking of YouTube, check out Locked On Sports Today. Can't miss news, analysis, opinions, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And don't fret, friends, the Bruins season is over, but Locked On Bruins will remain an everyday show through the draft, the beginning of free agency, and into the dog days of summer. This time last year, it was an incredibly devastating result for the Boston Bruins because we knew that it was potentially the end of an era, and the Bruins quite simply weren't going to be able to keep together the team that set the record for wins and points in the regular season in 2022-23. It's a much different story this year after losing to the Florida Panthers. For one thing, this team got further in the playoffs than they did last year after beating the Toronto Maple Leafs in Game 7. And as much as we laugh at the Leafs for not being able to get it done, for their deficiencies, that's a team at a different point in their trajectory than the Boston Bruins. That was a team with legitimate Stanley Cup hopes, with a high-end core of players. When you look at Austin Matthews, William Nylander, Mitch Marner, Morgan Riley, even John Tavares to an extent. Yes, there was some luck at play in that series for the Bruins in terms of injuries, illness, but the Bruins still got it done. And that's to their credit. This team exceeded expectations all season long. There were some people who weren't even picking them to make the playoffs. David Krejci retired. Of course, the big one, Patrice Bergeron retired. You had Taylor Hall and Nick Foligno, who were traded to the Chicago Blackhawks. Tyler Bertuzzi was not retained. Dmitry Orlov, Garnet Hathaway. A long list of exits, and in came some players who they hoped would help bridge that gap. Your James Van Riemsdykes, Kevin Shattenkirk, Milan Lucic. We all know how that ended. Not well. Your Jesper Boqvist, Danton Heinen, who was not even signed until after the season started, came in on a PTO and stuck around and earned his spot. Patrick Maroon was a nice addition to the lineup. And then you had some younger guys step in and really prove that they warrant consideration for prime spots on this team moving forward. John Beecher had his ups and downs, but he's a keeper in my mind. Justin Brazeau emerged as a guy who could put the puck in the net, a big body, and he's under contract for next season at $775,000. That's fantastic value. Jacob Lauko came in and out of the lineup in the playoffs, but he brought the energy. He was getting the puck on net. Matt Patra, of course, was sidelined for the playoffs, but he's a guy who will be in the lineup opening night and be a meaningful member of this team. And then on the blue line, you have Mason Lohrei, who stepped up, Parker Wotherspoon, who carved out a nice role, Andrew Peeke. The Bruins took a chance on him at the trade deadline, and he proved to be a good addition as well. The Bruins have some pieces in place here to move forward, and they have a chunk of cap space that they can use this summer. Now, they do have some of their own to take care of. They have decisions to make on Jake DeBrusk, of course, others, which we'll get to here in the what's next part of the season. But for what Don Sweeney put together and the ingredients that he gave Jim Montgomery to cook with this season, you can't sit back and say it's a failure. Certainly disappointing, that they were not able. Anytime you're in the Stanley Cup playoffs, it's disappointing when you're not able to get the ultimate goal accomplished. And that's largely what Brad Marchand had to say at Media Day, closing out end of season media availability on Sunday. And we'll talk about this more on tomorrow's show. But he said, obviously, it's disappointing when you don't achieve your goal, regardless of where the expectations were to start the season. Not internally. Internally, they all expected to have a good year. But from the outside noise and kind of where everyone projected the team to be, the team grew a ton. And there were a lot of things they had to overcome, according to Marchand. And we can all see that. A lot of changes, a ton of new guys, a lot of young guys coming in, huge pieces lost. There's lots of things you can look at in the series. Marchand said that if they would have capitalized on an opportunity or two, it could have been a much different series. And it's tough to see it end the way it did when you look at it like that. Disappointment. But he added, quote, definitely a lot we can take away and be happy about and look forward to improve upon next year. With the base that we have and the new outlook of our group and the new core, you can look at next year and be excited and look to improve upon that. So, yeah, Marchand said, quote, I don't want to sit here and say it was a huge success this year because at the end of the day, we play for a cup. That's what you want. That's what you build for. The entire season is an opportunity to be in the playoffs and to ultimately win. So we accomplished the goal by getting in the playoffs, but we didn't accomplish the ultimate goal, end quote. And that's kind of where I am as well. That's exactly where I am. It's disappointing to lose to the Panthers, and you can look at that series and parse it and say, if this went that way or that went this way, the Bruins could have won. The Bruins could be playing in a Game 7 on Sunday night, or they could have advanced, take out the New York Rangers, maybe even go to the Cup final. Who knows once you get round by round. There was a path to victory for the Bruins. That's not what played out, unfortunately, but it was still a successful season in a way for the Bruins because they had some core guys emerge. They had some young guys step up, and they had, they exceeded expectations in my estimation because nobody expected them to do much of anything this season anyways. And there is some hope for the future. And we're going to take a look at what's next here coming up as the podcast continues, but also a quick word about the injuries that the Bruins were dealing with here this season. Apparently, David Pastrnak was playing through a groin injury during the regular season, which is pretty incredible because he was still a top 5 scorer. Did not affect him in the playoffs. Charlie McAvoy said he had an acromioclavicular, which is a joint in the shoulder where two bones meet. He said it's a really annoying injury. He dealt with it all year, and he likely will have that looked at in the offseason. Brandon Carlos said he was injury-free. There was another one. Jake DeBrusk said that he had a hand injury that he was dealing with through the course of the regular season. I believe it was his hand. And that hindered him during the regular season. Obviously, he did not have the regular season that he wanted, didn't put up the numbers that he or the Bruins wanted in this contract year. But as far as the Bruins went, they were relatively healthy in the playoffs. You get the long list of injuries that are affecting guys. Obviously, nobody was really 100%. Marchand missed a couple games, but otherwise, we're not pinning this on injuries. We're not pinning it on bad luck. The Panthers, look, they're the better team. They had more finish than the Bruins did, and the Bruins need to add some scoring here in the offseason. They just could not finish their high danger opportunities, and their season ended too early, but a lot of things went right for this team this season. Full credit to Don Sweeney for the additions that he made that paid off. Van Riemsdyk, Heinen, Shattenkirk to some extent, targeting or bringing in Parker Witherspoon, Jesper Boqvist, Morgan Geekie, I should add, had a great season as one of those kind of value adds last summer. And there's going to be a lot of changes coming up this summer. We'll take a quick look at what's next in this offseason preview coming up as the podcast continues. eBay Motors has everything you need to level up your vehicle here in 2024. The formula for winning championships is passion, drive, patience, depth, finishing your high danger chances. But the formula for winning with your vehicle is so simple. All you have to do to keep your ride alive is visit ebaymotors.com. They have everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. 122 million parts to choose from, and with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. With eBay Motors, you are burning rubber and not cash. All the parts you need at the prices you want. Make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. The eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. All right, what is next for the Boston Bruins? Well, it could be a pretty busy offseason. A bunch of guys talked on Sunday. I'm going to go over their remarks in tomorrow's episode more in detail, what we learned from all those guys, aside from those injury notes I mentioned. I expect end of season remarks from Jim Montgomery, Cam Neely, Don Sweeney, perhaps even the Jacobs family in the days to come, and we'll be sure to break down all that as well. But there already are things we know to be on the table. I mentioned the future of Jake DeBrusk, and he was saying on Sunday that he certainly wants to remain. He said his priority in free agency is to win. And, he's been in the playoffs 7 times, a lot of experience playing games, close in 2019. All he wants to do is win a Stanley Cup. That's his number one priority. And he would like to stay in Boston. There haven't been any more discussions yet, but it's clear that he wants to stick around. I believe, based on his playoff performance, and if he was dealing with a hand injury in the regular season, that the Bruins should be eager to re-sign him. Maybe not at the number he wants, and that could be the biggest differentiator on whether or not he stays or goes is the salary, the term. Will another team come out of the blue and offer more than what the Bruins are willing to? Would he want to return home to Edmonton and maybe play for the Oilers and help them win with McDavid and Draisaitl? Who knows? But that's going to be a huge, huge question. The other big question is what will become of the goaltending tandem. Again, we'll discuss this more in detail in the coming days, but Jeremy Swayman's a restricted free agent, and based on his playoff performance and his whole career trajectory, he deserves a nice deal. And our boy Linus Ullmark has 1 year left on a contract that will pay him $5 million. You want to be committing double digits in the millions to a goaltending tandem where again, one guy is going to sit in the playoffs. They tried to move Ullmark prior to this year's trade deadline. That $5 million plus the 4.5 that had been going to the bonus overages for Bergeron and Krejci, $9.5 million. That's a nice player that you could have added to the mix. So I think the Bruins will look to explore options. He has a no trade list, which will be 15 teams. So do the math. That leaves half the league where the Bruins could conceivably trade Ullmark, but the price has to be right. And that's going to be a big big question mark. There's also, do they reevaluate the coaching? I think Jim Montgomery made some positive steps this season. There were still some things that were head scratching, lineup changes in the Leaf series for one. But overall, I think he did a good job with what he had. I believe he's under contract for one more season. The Bruins could look to extend him, or they could wait and see how next season goes before doing that. But I think the coach is safe for the time being, as is the general manager. I don't think there'll be any changes at that level, but there certainly will be some changes personnel-wise. You have 5 unrestricted free agents up front, including DeBrusk, Heinen, Maroon, Van Riemsdyk. Jason Megna is included in that as well. On the blue line, you have Derek Forbort, Matt Grzelcyk, Kevin Shattenkirk, all of whom could very well be gone. They currently have $21-ish million in cap space, and that is with Ullmark still against the cap. They could raise that up close to 26, 27 if they decide to move on from him. So a lot of money to be spent this offseason, some clear holes to fill. You want to add more depth down the middle. You need to add a scoring winger, in my mind. With some guys leaving on defense, you want to add some depth. I don't know if you want to run out a lineup with Witherspoon and Lohrei as your bottom 2 on defense for a full 82 games. There's going to be a lot of changes. Again, I don't expect any coaching-wise or management-wise, but there will be some. And we'll look coming up at the 3 biggest questions facing the Bruins, but those are certainly the top 2, DeBrusk and Ullmark. What will become of them next season? At any rate, for today, we're disappointed that the Bruins did not move forward in the playoffs, but I'm not disappointed in the team as a whole. Again, they exceeded expectations in my mind this season, and winning around was fantastic. Pushing the Panthers to almost a Game 7 was great. With the adversity that they had faced in that series, they didn't really goon it up in response. They tried to do it the right way, and we're fairly close to getting it done. There's a lot of pieces to build on here. We're not doing any Swayman slander. We're not doing any trade McAvoy ridiculousness. We're not doing any Pasta can't step up in the postseason nonsense either. Those are your core 3 players moving forward. And that a lot of teams would love to have those 3 players as their building blocks. Make no mistake about that. Anyways, that's it for today's episode, my friends. Thank you so much for taking some time. Please do subscribe if you haven't already. Not going anywhere here in the next several weeks. We'll continue to talk about the Boston Bruins, looking ahead to next season. Whatever comes up, catch all the latest on Locked On Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day.